So, I want to start off by saying that I still work for this company, and I still have anxiety every time I go into work. The company is huge, one of the biggest names in the world. For privacy purposes, I'm going to call it the Big Cheese or Big C. I also want to mention that I have crippling social anxiety. I credit to being homeschooled most of my life. This will make more sense later. Well, September of last year I was fresh out of high school and looking for work. I needed this job immediately because I was living with my significant other, and we were barely getting by. My father and my grandfather both either work or worked for this company for a long period of time, and it is something that garnered a lot of respect in my family. So of course, I was thrilled when I got my first interview. It went great and I was all set to start training, which involved a few classes and on-the-job training. The classes were awkward to say the least, but nonetheless informative. Well, after the classes, we had our first task: join a group of fellow trainees and tour the work environment. This was when I first met the creepy coworker. He was in the very back of my group, seemed a little shy and didn't really talk to the rest of the group, unless he was trying to make an awkward joke to join in. At first, I just kind of felt bad for him. He seemed harmless, but definitely awkward and out of the loop. Knowing as much as I did going into the company, I made the effort to inform him and keep him updated with what the trainers were asking of us. He just seemed so lost and confused. I thought I was doing a good thing by helping him out. Even my significant other thought so at the time. The training went by without any hiccups, and soon we were given the location of where we would start out. Ironically enough, the only person that I'd gotten to know, the creepy coworker, had the same area that I did. Realizing that we would start out together and both didn't know anyone, we decided to exchange phone numbers. This was so that we could both meet up the next week, the starting day, so we wouldn't get lost. I thought nothing of this when he asked for my number, and just assumed it was more because he was nervous and didn't know anyone beside me. Boy, did I live to regret that. The first day of training, we met up at basically a flagpole so that we could wait for our on-the-job trainer, Christy. When we got off the employee shuttle, he started texting me asking where I was. I was in the smoking section a little ways away, killing my fears with a cigarette. I texted back telling him where I was and he asked if he could join. I didn't like how nervous I felt, so I wasn't very comfortable with anyone joining me during this time of reprieve. But I saw him coming over anyways, so I scooted over to make room on the bench. This didn't matter, because apparently he was going to sit as close as possible to me anyways. I hate touch or people being in my personal bubble, being a victim of other trauma. Touch was something only people very close to me had permission to do. A creepy coworker then proceeded to ask me if he could bum a cigarette, and I'm not good at saying no, so I gave him one. After he lit up, he handed me my lighter, that I didn't even notice he took from the top of my bag back to me. Again, I just kind of ignored the unwarranted invasion of my space. We talked since we had about 30 minutes to kill. We talked about the normal stuff like, how do you feel about the company? Where do you want to end up in it? I noticed that he was wearing tattoo covering sleeves, and so I asked him about his tattoos. He pulled down the sleeves and started going over almost each and every one. All had something to do with either a love interest or something geeky. I listened out of mild curiosity, but quickly got uncomfortable when he started pulling out his phone to show me pictures of ones that he drew. I was uncomfortable because he kept showing me pictures of himself as well. Mostly pictures of him shirtless, and I didn't really find that appropriate. He mentioned he was a Marine and that he had gained too much weight after his last tour. I apologized out of sympathy, but suggested that it was nothing to be ashamed of. Unfortunately, after that, he kept smiling at me in a way I deemed to be admiration. I had seen this look from my fiancé, so I knew somewhere I had effed up. I quickly turned the conversation to more appropriate stuff like music taste. He seemed interested in what music I liked a little too much, and decided that he should make me a playlist. I said it really wasn't necessary, but he insisted. Later into that very day during training, he kept purposely doing kind things, like taking heavy boxes from my hands, or taking the odd jobs he deemed too grueling for a lady. I was a little annoyed, but mostly just glad most of the jobs meant that he would have to go to a different area and give me some space. He would always find a way back to appear beside me and scare me. I hate being scared, and he laughed it off every time. I was more than uncomfortable at this point, and a nervousness had settled in the pit of my stomach. At the end of the night, after we had been sent to go home and come back the next day, he decided to walk me out. We would walk back through the maze my workplace actually is, all the way to the employee costume center or lockers. It was there that we had gotten our work costumes and stored our regular clothing in lockers. Well, I was having trouble remembering the combination and couldn't find the little slip of paper that told me it. Creepy coworker came up and smirked at me, seemingly waiting for me to finish up. I thought that he had left by this point, so I wasn't expecting him to show up. After a few tries, he reached over and put the combination on my lock in for me. This was a serious red flag for me. He had already memorized my combination, and now I felt as though my privacy was completely gone. Again, I'm awkward and unsure of what to do in any situation like this, so I thanked him but suggested that he let me figure it out next time. I was hoping he would, so that he would forget my combination. Remember this for later. After changing back into my regular clothes in the girls' locker room, I came out and he was still waiting for me. I asked him why he had waited when he could have just gotten home sooner, to which he replied, "Because I'm a gentleman and a lady should be walked to her car so she can be kept safe." I told him that my significant other was waiting to pick me up. He asked where and I told him, down the street like an idiot. I still don't know why I complied with this creep as much as I did, but I had never been in a situation like this one. He told me that it was too far for me to walk and that it wasn't safe, so he offered to drive me over to my significant other's car. Due to how tired I was and how much I ached from the day, I didn't have much strength to argue. I mean, he was creepy, but nice. I chalked up the creepiness to him just being awkward. So, without anything else weird happening, he took me to my significant other, whom I had been texting the entire time, just to let him know where I was and what was going on. I had a deep gut feeling that I should text him everything I knew about the guy, and so I did. When we pulled up, I immediately got out of the car. My boyfriend sat there leaning against the car with his arms crossed. He wasn't very happy about him giving me a ride, but nonetheless thanked the creepy coworker for getting me over to him safely. The coworker nodded, seeming to smirk at my boyfriend the whole time. This was when my boyfriend first got a bad feeling about this guy. So, we got home and my boyfriend warned me about the guy, telling me that he wasn't getting a good vibe from the creepy coworker. It was not even 3 minutes after that, I got a text from the coworker. He started sending me songs and memes and telling me things like, "I really feel like you get me." Now, I was deeply concerned. What the hell did I get myself into? And why did I have to be so dang nice to people? The following day at work, I was on the last day of training, and I had a massive panic attack. I have a chronic illness, and the situation ended with none of my managers listening to me when I told them that the pain doesn't last and it comes and goes. They proceeded to rush me to the emergency room. Of course, the customers were quick to take out their phones and film the whole thing. It was one of the worst experiences of my life, but what happens next is worse. I received about 20 text messages from the creepy coworker asking me how I was. At this point, I was done and I just didn't respond. After a few random memes, he started texting me that he was drunk and thinking about not going home to his wife. This was the first time he had ever mentioned to me he even had a wife. I was dumbfounded. Why was he so concerned about me when he had someone he obviously loved enough to marry? I didn't respond and I went to bed. In the morning, I woke up to my boyfriend looking at my phone in anger. My heart sank and I can only imagine what creepy coworker it sent now. My boyfriend showed me the only text I had gotten since the night before. It was from his wife texting me from his phone. She wrote me a message explaining that creepy coworker had a problem getting attached to women. She warned me that I should stay away from him, and then told me her name. My name. It was after that she had explained my name was a thing for him. Of all of his exes had the same name. Now at this point, my boyfriend was telling me not to go back to this job, that it wasn't worth it. But that's not me. I wasn't going to let this one creep ruin this opportunity for me. This job meant the world to me, and I never wanted to let it go. So I told him if this continues that I would go to HR. But in all honesty, I didn't really want to go to HR. I was the new girl. I didn't want the first month on the job to be me fighting a harassment case. Biting my nails the whole way I went to work. Suddenly, creepy coworker wasn't hovering anymore. I thought this might have been him being embarrassed. I was pretty convinced I wasn't going to have a problem after that. Big mistake. On my lunch break, he made sure to go on his lunch early and come find me. His normally enthusiastic attitude was gone, replaced by what felt like anger. I was scared. He came up to me and let me know that his wife was full of crap and just angry because he was divorcing her. At this point, I didn't want anything to do with him, so I kept quiet, hoping that he would take the hint. Nope. He told me he had a gift for me and that he would give it to me after the shift, quickly walking away before I could respond. After my shift, I go outside the work area to the lockers. I had waited for an extra hour and a half, even taking a closing position from a coworker, just so that he would go home before me. Well, my lock was unlocked all the way and I was now freaked out. I opened the locker to grab my bag and go, but I noticed it. A rolled up piece of drawing paper. I know what kind it was because I myself am an artist. Unrolling it, it was a naked girl. A naked girl that resembled my video game character on World of Warcraft. I had briefly mentioned my WoW addiction to my group on the first group training day. I didn't even realize that he had heard any of that, much less memorized the information. Suddenly he walks up even though he should be long gone by then, and he confronts me. He asked me if I liked it, and because he seemed angry, I said yes. I suggested that he didn't do it anymore as my boyfriend wouldn't like this kind of gift at all. He rolled his eyes and playfully giggled at me like I was joking with him. I wasn't. Not only did he follow me the whole way out to the work grounds, he got on the employee shuttle that I got on to have witnesses. He sat right next to me, leaning on me. I felt like a deer in headlights, mentally begging someone to suggest that he shouldn't be that close to me. But no one paid any attention. Instead, I spent the whole drive trying to get this man to pull his arm off of my shoulders. I felt nauseated and my head was spinning. After we got off, I practically dashed off the bus and ran to my boyfriend who parked the car at the entrance to the employee parking zone. I got in the car and told him to go. He took off and I started crying. I told my boyfriend what had happened and he was upset. He wanted to turn around and confront the creepy coworker, but I talked him out of it through tears. I promised that I would talk to my managers after that. Well, I kept looking for the right time to pull a manager aside, but never got the chance the next night I went in. Now creepy coworker's attitude did another 180, and he was extremely weirdly playful. And then he crossed the final line. He grabbed my butt where customers could easily see him. My coworkers kind of laughed and thought it was a game, because this time I was pissed and pushed to my limit. I went after him and legitimately punched him in the butt and shouted in his face, "How do you like that, huh?" Seething, he seemed unfazed by my anger. Instead, he laughed it off and he winked at me. I went down into the basement for the employee bathroom and quickly threw up the contents of my stomach. I cried in the stall, praying to God that this would stop. I quickly made an excuse, using my chronic illness, and I went home. So fast forward a few weeks, and he had completely swapped out his shift so that he wouldn't work with me. I felt like I had won the battle. I sent a message and he realized that he had crossed boundaries. Until the night before Christmas Eve. I had a terrible feeling as my boyfriend was driving me to work that night. I felt gross. I got to work and he was there, flirting with other girls, suddenly having this big ego that I had never seen him display before. Like I said when I met him, he was shy and awkward. It's like his personality flipped every time that I had to see him. I never knew which side of CC I was gonna get. That night, he actually stopped off as all the other coworkers, including myself, closed the joint. We were scrubbing the floors like normal and he didn't seem all together, and so he clocked out early and I relaxed. I figured he had gotten in trouble since one of our 4 managers seemed to be upset that he had clocked out without permission. I was there extra late. The evening festivities were done with for the night and my zone was pretty much closed off from customers. And so I walked through the massive property that is my work to get to the street. I had started taking new ways to meet my boyfriend who picked me up, just so I couldn't be followed. This time, I was going to walk straight out of the grounds and onto the street where the bus stops were, and my boyfriend would be waiting at the curb. I was about halfway through my approximately 12-minute walk, and I was in a dark area. Out of nowhere, as I'm sure you've already guessed, creepy coworker shows up. He starts yelling my name and following me from behind. I pretend to not notice and walk faster. He yells my name again and seems angrier, and so I sprint for it. I sprint all the way to cross the shuttle zone and end up crashing into someone's chest. Thank God it was actually my boyfriend, who had a really bad feeling and wanted to be as close to my work exit as possible. I looked back and creepy coworker got on a shuttle but was staring from the window, smiling like a Cheshire cat the whole time. Never in my life had I been so terrified. After that, the next night was Christmas Eve and I was supposed to work, but I just knew if I went in, something bad was going to happen to me. So, crying the whole time because I knew I had earned a bunch of points for calling out to avoid him, I cried asking the lady on the phone if I was going to get fired and she said she honestly couldn't say. I respected that but knew I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let this creep make me lose my job that I had worked so hard to get. Even changing my appearance to fit their strict standards. No, so I wrote to the only person I could think of, my trainer, Christy. She was a lead and she is the kindest girl you would ever meet. She had a heart of gold. You just knew being her friend meant that you would have a trusted confidant for life. I told her everything. I sent her these screenshots of the text messages he sent to me. I finally told someone with an ounce of leadership that I was scared to go to work. Immediately she responded and asked if she could tell the managers. Even though I was incredibly nervous, I told her yes. The next day I was pulled in, and God bless my ex-manager Christopher, because he was shocked at everything that had happened to me and quickly helped me write a report for HR. He had led me through the steps and even changed these schedules so I wouldn't work with a creepy coworker unless he specifically traded shifts. 2 months go by, and I am well acquainted with the responsibilities for my work at this point, and I'm comfortable. But of course, there's no stopping a stalker. He had traded his shift and was working the night shift with me. He was angry every time he looked at me, and I avoided him at all costs. And then around halfway through my shift, I'm down in the basement coming back from the restroom. I'm walking up the steps that lead back to my work area, and then I feel someone behind me. Before I could even think a clear thought, I was pushed against the wall, a hand beside my head. He leans in and says, "You should smile more." And then the guy chuckles and walks away. I feel pretty hysterical at this point and I run to the closest lead, crying and trying to explain what happened. It was at this point that my manager Christopher Pissed off that HR was taking so long to investigate my case, went to them to speed it up. Well, after 4 months of an interview process with HR, finally the case was resolved and not only was he let go, but I was doing really well in my job finally. Nothing to worry me into not paying attention to my duties. The creepy coworker has left me alone ever since, but sometimes I get random friend requests from guys with no pictures and always similar names, always close to his name.